All aboard the coal train. Woo woo! To be honest, I guess that only I will get that reference. Anyway, yes, it's the backtracking episode of Crystal Call from the Renegades Discord server, and it'll be two parts as promised. Although, this one will have a slight twist as it'll be my first double episode to not have 8 albums, but 7, as I'll be covering all of Real Big Picture's work, except for their covers album entitled Fame, Fortune and Fornication. With that in mind, Real Big Fish first formed in Huntington Beach, California, and they've been around for over 2.5 decades now, and have released 8 albums, of which I'll be covering 7. Mixing classic ska punk energy, a sense of humour and a goofball enthusiasm to everything, it's clear to see and hear that they've enjoyed their time together, even though the only member remaining since the size lead singer and guitarist Aaron Barrett. Also, I'm going in pretty much blind, completely, and also part 1 will cover their first 4 albums, and part 2 will cover the last 3. Anyway, this is Backtracking, and this time it's Real Big Fish. Cole, I hope you enjoy it. So we begin with their debut, titled Everything Sucks. Released in 1995 through the band's own indie label called Piss Off Records, which is a great name, before being re-released in 2000 through Drive and Mojo and produced by Zach Schutt. It's honestly a really good intro to the band. Despite having a producer, it has a really raw, lo-fi sound, which actually benefits the ska punk energy contained within. A few effects before carrying on, the album cover shows a little girl getting what I think is either kissed or bitten by a dog, I'm not really sure. That little girl is the little sister of the band's then bassist Matt Wong. Also, a lot of the songs from this album were re-recorded for most of their future stuff, specifically on Turn the Radio Off, Why Did They Rock So Hard, and Monkeys for Nothing and the Chimps Are Free. As a side note, there is a re-recorded version of the song Beer from this album that appears on We're Not Happy Till You're Not Happy, and lastly, the only songs from this album not to be redone are Boyfriend, Foehead, Jig, Go Away, and the album's closer in Superhero number 5. Also, this album is really long. It's not their longest, but it's up there. I didn't expect a ska punk album to be both so long and so energetic and just nutty at the same time, but that's the case when it comes to Everything Sucks. There are 21 tracks in total, and of those, 7 of them don't hit the 3-minute mark, with 3 of those not even hitting 2 minutes. But they're still short, sweet, to the point, and just a lot of fun. I guess part of it was due to the fact that the band members themselves were still quite young, what with some of them still being in high school at the time of the album's recording. But still, to put a band together, make a long album with a lot of tracks, and do it all through your own record label whilst still attending high school, that's pretty damn impressive, to be honest. Speaking of the band, let's go through what the lineup was at the time. Aaron Barrett as lead vocalist and guitarist, Matt Wong on bass, Andrew Gonzalez on drums, Dan Reagan and Robert Quimby both on trombone, Tavis Wirtz on trumpet, I hope I'm saying his first name right, and Adam Polikoff on saxophone. A good reason for the album's live-play sound is the fact that a lot of the songs are re-recorded from demos, which explains why the band released their debut 4 years after their initial formation. As I mentioned, some of them were still going to high school, so it stands a chance that not many of them could record a full album in the usual time span that it takes nowadays. But that is usually a smart way for younger bands to go about it, I think, especially if you're a punk band in the early to mid-90s, regardless of the subgenre. Record and release a bunch of demos in a row to both gauge a reaction from people and pass the time until you can record a full studio album, then record said studio album and hope for the best. Luckily, it pays off as the band put together a really good sounding album that's fun and surprisingly catchy despite how raw it feels. Aaron's vocals are sometimes difficult to discern, but they are good, and his messages about breakups, relationships, and fame are easy enough to get. Also has some really good speedy riffs and even a handful of nice solos. Matt's bass work is really awesome, and the ska punk bass is always good with a great riffs and grizz of his own. And his drumming's great, but it does feel a tiny bit drowned out by the lo-fi sound in my opinion. It's still really good. The brass section is fantastic, especially the trombone work. It's just fun and bouncy as it should be. Standout songs include Beer, Call You, Trendy, the great closer that is Superhero number 5, and my favourite in Skytanic. Or Scartanic, I have no idea how to pronounce that. Either way, Everything Sucks is a slightly ironic name for an album that doesn't suck. It's fun, catchy, the band clearly enjoy what they're doing, and it'll even make you laugh a bit on occasion. I can recommend this one without much issue. Next up, we reached their second studio album entitled Turn the Radio Off, released in 1996 through Mojo Records and produced by them themselves along with Jay Rifkin and John Avila. The band's second album does have a few changes. First is the length, as this album is not only 20 minutes shorter than their debut, but also their shortest album overall at 42 minutes and 37 seconds. It's also the band's only album with a guest singer, as Monique Pearl from the band Say Ferris appears on the track She Has a Girlfriend Now. Also, despite the fact that the album has 16 tracks, 10 of those are from their debut, with 2 having the names changed. The re-recorded songs are Join the Club, Trendy, I'll Never Be, Skatanic, Say 10, Beer, Snoop Dogg Baby, SR, and the songs Cool Ending and All I Want Is More are just an acoustic version of the song I'm Cool and the song Fuck Yourself, but with a different title, respectively. As for SR, that stands for Suburban Rhythm, but I never got to hear that song at the band's debut, as it was only on original pressings of the album, and obviously I find whatever version I can. It's still a good song, though. So I don't know what that was. Another odd one is the final track in Cool Ending. Technically it's 4 minutes long, but the first 2 minutes of it is just silence. Anyway, there are some slight lineup changes as Robert Quimby and Adam Polikoff left some time before the album's release, bringing in 2 new members in Grant Berry on trombone and Scott Klopfenstein, I hope I have no idea to say his surname, on trumpet, meaning that this album doesn't have a saxophone player. In fact, their debut would be the only album with a saxophone until their most recent album, Candy Coated Fury. Sure, guest musicians would pop up to play sax, but as for permanent members, no dice. Anyway, the production of this album, yeah, it's way better than it was on their debut. Even having said that, there is still that slightly raw feeling with some of the heavier songs from their debut only being bolstered to further heights on their sequel. They do start to take themselves a bit more seriously, but they're still having a lot of fun. And yes, this album does contain the song Sell Out, which is probably their best known song. However, it wasn't my first real Big Fish song. That honor goes to, well, I'm going to tell you in part 2 as it was on one of those albums. Classic swerving maneuver from me there. Aha! The album sound really isn't much different to their debut, in all honesty. It's still fun, happy sounding, bouncy, and really catchy. If it were up to me, I'd rather have all of their songs be original, not just 6 of them, and maybe save the re-recorded versions for bonus tracks like some bands tend to do, but that's just a small nitpick. Aaron's vocals sound a lot clearer, partially due to the better production, but even then it sounds great with good comic timing and great looks about the music industry, old girlfriends and partying. His guitar work isn't too bad either, providing some great riffs at the cost of having no solos on this album, which is kind of weird. Grant and Scott make great welcome new additions to the group, with awesome work from both of them, same with Dan and Tavis. Just great brass instruments all around. Matt's bass gets a bit more time to shine on its own, and has some really good riffs. And Hunter's drumming is easier to hear, going along well with everyone else, and really nice, hard-hitting stuff, really good. Standout songs include Jazz Girlfriend Now, Alternative Baby, Everything Sucks, named after their previous album, Nothing, and my favourite in Sell Out. It's easy to view Turn the Radio Off as a better produced version of their debut, but with some new stuff that's also brilliantly polished and great performances all around. I can recommend it even with the familiarity of some of the older tracks. It's really good. Now so we reached their third album, in Why Do They Rock So Hard. That was terrible, I did not mean to mess that up. Released in 1998, there are only some minor changes in terms of personnel with this one. First is that it was released through both Mojo and Jive Records. Secondly, the only producer to not return from the previous album is Jay Rifkin. And lastly, this is so far the first and only album to not have any lineup changes for the band at all. Another thing is that it's their longest album at 1 hour, 3 minutes and 52 seconds in total. Having said that, there are more changes to the sound of the album. First of all is that there are fewer songs from the previous 2 with a lot more original stuff, which I quite like. It doesn't feel like a DLC pack like their second album did to their first, if that makes sense. There's also the introduction of some new stuff for this one, including some keyboard work and the members trying out new instruments, so let's go over those. Aaron adds some synthesizer and Celesta work, Scott provides keyboards and a Celesta of his own, Dan Reagan provides screams, which aren't even an instrument, but shut up, they're awesome, and Tavis Ward starts playing the flugelhorn, which is kind of like a trumpet but way bigger. So, yeah, with new instruments comes a new element of experimentation and a new layer to the sound of things. It's not used too much with the production, making sure it only shows up when it's needed. There is also more backing vocals, and with the extra layer... There is also more backing vocal work, and with the layer provided with Dan's additional screams, well, occasional screams, it just throws on something extra. Granted, there was some screaming on their first albums, but it's much more established on here, even though it's not used as much, if that makes sense. But I'm fine with that, you know, much like with the other instruments that they brought in, it's not used too much, but it's there and it's only brought about when it's actually needed. There's also the tone of the album, which is slightly more serious than their previous 2 works. It still shows that the band can take the piss out of themselves in what they do from time to time, but there are fewer examples of that on here, and it's a really good balance. The album still has a fun sound to it, but this is arguably the time where the band did kind of start growing up. They still didn't take themselves seriously and were still joking around, but the signs start to show in this album. Having said that, they were a band for 7 years by this point, and album 3 is usually the time of band's career, in a band's career where things start to get a bit serious. Okay, so they are still a bunch of goofballs, but there's a bit less of that and more seriously toned stuff, even if the subject matter isn't as serious. The members bolster that balance well, with Aaron's vocals sounding much more crisp, bringing across his usual messages of girls, the industry, and fame. Also, he gets a few nice guitar solos in, which I really like. He needs more solos, I think. Matt's bass work is good, keeping a steady groove of things, and Andrew's drumming isn't too bad either, with good timing and flow with the rest of the band. The brass section adds new instruments, adding new instruments is nice, and they get some really cool multi-solos, like they did on the previous two albums. Standard songs include Thank You for Not Moshing, Everything is Cool, She's Famous Now, The Setup in brackets You Need This, and my favourite in Big Star. Why don't they rock so hard is an album with a good question, and I have the answers. Good production, teamwork, and performances, not to mention the will to experiment a little bit. I can recommend this one easily. Next up is their fourth album, Cheer Up! And no, I'm not yelling, it is spelled with an exclamation point, so yeah. Released through Mojo and Drive and produced by Aaron Barrett, Scott Klopfenstein, Val Garay, and Geordie Johnson, there are slight changes. I meant Geordie there, Geordie is different. First of all, it only has 5 members, with those being Barrett, Klopfenstein, Matt Wong, Dan Reagan, and new drummer Carlos de la Garza. Also, it's the first album to feature cover songs. Okay, so technically the third album adds some, but those covers were on the Japanese release and I listened to the Western version, so don't judge me. Those covers are New York, New York by Frank Sinatra, Boss DJ by Sublime, and The Closer and Give It To Me by the J. Giles Band, which is listed as a hidden track attached to the previous one entitled Drunk Again. So, despite being listed as 17 tracks, it is technically 16. That's weird. Also weird is that I would personally have had Drunk Again as the album's last song. Nothing against their cover, of which I've never heard the original version, by the way, but I feel like Drunk Again is just the better song between that and Give It To Me. Despite the album being titled Cheer Up, the band actually take themselves a bit more seriously on this one. That more mature tone that they dabbled with on Why Do They Rock So Hard is taken a few notches on Cheer Up. Part of that is the addition of more rock-heavy stuff and solos, dabbling with some pop-punk and old-school punk rock. That's more present on the first chunk of the album with little bits here and there, and something I forgot to mention is that about that last album is that there was some dabbling with more reggae soul as well. That's kind of on here too, but it's on there to a lesser extent. Something I forgot to mention about their last album is that there was some dabbling with more reggae style as well. It's kind of on here too, but to a lesser extent. Also, pretty much all the other instruments they used last time have been dropped, with the exception of electric piano. That's pretty much the only noticeable difference. Also, I'm sorry if I said something twice. I thought I paused it and I didn't, and just deal with it, okay? Yeah. There is still that same sense of humour, but there are much more serious things and even some slightly slower tracks, which actually give things a really good balance without getting overly schizophrenic with it. One thing that I kind of don't like is that sometimes the lyrics get slightly repetitive. Don't get me wrong, it's pretty much only some repeated phrases used to close the songs, which does work really well, especially for a ska punk band that is used very sparingly, only on about 3 of the album's 16 tracks. Yes, I'm sticking to the claim of the album having 16. It claims it has 17, but come on, we all know the truth. So yeah, it's nice to have things slightly more stripped down and serious, and at this stage the band truly were growing up more, so to have a change of things really benefited them at that point in time. Aaron gets more solos, which is just great. His vocals are awesome as well, belting home his lyrics of relationships, friendships, and former girlfriends. Matt's bass work is still good, adding some good scales here and there. Dan and Scott are both still awesome on their instruments, with good backup work when combined. And Carlos's only appearance on a Real Big Fish album is a solid one, with some great work behind the kit, combining great timing, speed, and just a really good sense of fun. Standout songs include Somebody Loves Me, Dateless Losers, Where Have You Been, What Are Friends For, and my favourite, and Drunk Again. Despite being a longer album and despite the band growing up, there's still this unmistakable sense of fun to things, with the band showing their maturity through great lyrics and musicianship. I can recommend this one without any problems. Anyway, that about does it for part 1. I'll see you all tomorrow for part 2, where I'll cover the last 3 albums from We're Not Happy to You're Not Happy to Candy Coated Fury. I'll see you all then, and thank you for watching.